Number 8. Life-ending love triangle. In 2022, 30-year-old Ashley Bocanegra went to an apartment in Beaufort, Georgia. She thought she was going to see the father of her child. What she didn't know is that the man's girlfriend, 27-year-old Antonetta Stevens, and his sister, Janine Gonzalez, were using his cell phone to lure Ashley over. Stevens discovered that the man was cheating on her and was furious. When Ashley arrived, Stevens allegedly attacked her. According to police, she beat her, then asked Gonzalez if she wanted in on the action. Together they kicked and punched the victim until she could no longer breathe and recorded the attack on video. The man and women were entangled in a love triangle with someone who was also reportedly home during the vicious assault. Authorities have not released many details about the nature of his involvement, but they said his shoulders and back were covered with injuries. He took Ashley to the hospital a few hours after the attack, but her injuries were so serious she had to be taken elsewhere. She later died from internal bleeding in her lungs. Stevens and Gonzalez were quickly charged with murder, robbery, and aggravated battery. In court, Gonzalez's lawyer claimed that she was an innocent bystander and that she should only face a reduced manslaughter charge. But prosecutors argued the video evidence proves otherwise. Both women remain behind bars without bond while awaiting the next steps in their cases. Number 7. Birthday bloodshed. In 2022, Ahmad Perkins was walking up the front steps of an apartment building in Crown Heights, Brooklyn, on his 45th birthday when he was shot in the head. He fell to the ground and died in broad daylight. When police got there, they saw Perkins' BMW double-parked and idling in the street. The shooting was clearly unexpected. In the words of a neighbor who spoke with the New York Daily News, it seemed like someone was waiting for him. Perkins had a troubled past that included 4 prison stints for assault, drug, and gun charges. But he was incredibly well liked by people in his community, and after being released from his most recent sentence in 2018 and finishing parole in 2021, the hospital worker's life seemed to be heading down a better path, and nobody, including the police, knew who might have wanted him dead. 2 months after the shooting, 18-year-old Kendu Skeen was finally charged with murder after being taken into custody for an unrelated case. Authorities declined to reveal a motive, and the case is ongoing. Number 6. Terroristic trio. In a story that's just as bizarre as it is tragic, police were called to a remote property in New South Wales, Australia, one night in late 2022 regarding the possible location of a man named Nathaniel Train, who'd been missing. The 4 officers who initially responded were immediately met with gunfire after getting out of their vehicles. 26-year-old Matthew Arnold and 29-year-old Rachel McCrow were fatally shot, while another officer escaped with only minor injuries. The 4th cop found herself battling fires, which the shooters lit, trying to corner and hunt her down, but one of the surviving cops luckily managed to call for backup. In the meantime, a neighbor came by to help the police and was also killed. The hours-long standoff ended after the 3 shooters were put down by police. They were identified as Larry Train, the missing man, his brother Gareth, and Gareth's wife Stacy, who had once been married to Larry. The trio practiced an extremist form of fundamentalist Christianity called premillennialism, which influenced them to think police were evil. Evidence at the scene indicated that the Trains planned and prepared for the massacre well ahead of time, and that they lured the officers to the property. Upon investigation, authorities saw that the site was riddled with barriers, camouflaged hideouts, guns, knives, and dirt roads. In an interview with the Australian talk show A Current Affair, Gareth and Larry's father, Ronald Train, said that his sons completely lost their way in life after cutting their family out of their lives 20 years earlier. He said their fascination with weapons started during childhood, but that Gareth was particularly volatile, controlling, and obsessed with guns, despite being raised in a household with non-violent beliefs. Officers classified the incident as an act of terrorism and said it was the first time in Australia's history that such a violent crime was linked to extreme Christian beliefs. Law enforcement ruled out the likelihood that anyone else in the country was involved in the attack, but they linked the Trains to some people in the United States and notified American authorities. Number 5. Deceptive drive-by. 27-year-old Sukhdeep Gill was working as a deputy for the Santa Clara County Sheriff's Office in California when he called for help from his colleagues in 2020, claiming he had been shot in a drive-by shooting. Gill said he stopped along a remote road to pee and that he was walking back to his patrol car when a silver sedan pulled up with its headlights turned off. Someone then shot at him from a passenger side window, and he returned fire, shooting at the car twice before it sped away. Responding officers were relieved when they found Gill practically uninjured. The bullet had shattered his body cam, but otherwise he seemed okay. An extensive manhunt failed to turn up any trace of the alleged shooter. In fact, investigators couldn't find any evidence of the attack to support what Gill had told them. They also found evidence that suggested the shooting was fake, which helped explain why they couldn't find any solid leads. Over a year after the strange incident, authorities charged Gill with filing a false police report and felony vandalism. He was put on administrative leave while the case played out in court. Allegations against Gill came as a huge disappointment to District Attorney Jeff Rosen, who described the case as bewildering and deeply disturbing. On top of breaking the law, he accused Gill of breaking the trust of his fellow officers and squandering public resources on a made-up crime instead of the community's safety. Number 4. Baited and beaten. Former Texas State Senate candidate Vanessa Tijerina had a terrible Christmas Eve in 2020 when she was lured to a hotel and attacked. It all started when a woman in a black bra approached Tijerina in Raymondville, near the Mexican border. The mystery lady identified herself as Amanda Salinas. She told Tijerina that she had to tell her something important about her safety before leading her to a room at a nearby Texas inn. When they arrived, 3 people bound, gagged, and brutally beat Tijerina, leaving her with a severely bruised and swollen face and broken teeth. During the assault, the victim overheard a man giving instructions to the suspects over the phone. Authorities charged Salinas and the other 2 attackers, Ariel Vera and Raymond Santana Jr., with a list of crimes. Salinas was accused of engaging in organized criminal activity, assault, unlawful restraint, aggravated robbery, aggravated assault with a deadly weapon, and more. Santana Jr. and Vera were charged with engaging in organized criminal activity, unlawful restraint, and other crimes. The outcomes of the case are unclear, and the trio's motive for attacking Tijerina remains a mystery. Number 3. Christian family targeted by cartel. After the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, popularly known as the Mormon Church, banned polygamy in the 19th century, people who wanted to continue the practice formed their own separate communities. Some migrated about 70 miles, 113 kilometers south of the Arizona-Mexico border, where they formed a rural enclave called La Mora. Located in a desert valley surrounded by mountains, the small community has fewer than 1,000 residents. Many descend from the original settlers, while others moved there more recently. La Mora was historically known as a community that lived away from the outside world, but their peace was shaken in 2019 when drug traffickers ambushed 3 SUVs and 17 people along a remote dirt road. Violence wasn't unheard of in the area, but locals had traveled along the road many times before without any issues. At the time of the attack, the Sinaloa Cartel was involved in a heated turf war with another drug syndicate. Cartel members opened fire on the victims in a disturbing case of mistaken identity, thinking they were drug trade enemies when they were actually just innocent civilians who had no desire for any trouble. 9 people died in the shooting, including 3 young mothers. Some of the surviving victims, which included at least 5 who were suffering from gunshot wounds, hid in nearby bushes while others walked to find help. Terry Langford, who holds dual citizenship like many others from La Mora and splits his time between Mexico and the US, lost an aunt and 2 cousins that day. He told the South Florida Sun-Sentinel that his aunt was on her way to Phoenix and his 2 cousins were on their way to visit relatives in another part of Mexico. In response to the shooting, the military increased its presence in the region, but the gunmen remained at large in the weeks after the senseless tragedy, and it's unclear whether they were ever actually arrested or not. Number 2. Lone gunman versus federal agents. In what turned out to be the deadliest incidents for the FBI since the attacks on the World Trade Towers in 2001, a gunman opened fire on federal agents who were carrying out a search warrant in Sunrise, Florida in early 2021. The team gathered outside the apartment of 55-year-old David Lee Huber early in the morning with plans to catch him off guard. But the investigation went horribly wrong when Huber started shooting at the team, killing Special Agents Daniel Alfin and Laura Schwarzenberger and hurting 3 others. He then took his own life. A witness said they heard dozens of gunshots and watched a SWAT team crash a military truck into Huber's front patio during the chaos. Huber lived alone and had no criminal record in the state of Florida. On paper, he seemed like an ordinary law-abiding citizen, minus a handful of traffic citations. He was educated and made a good living as an engineer, but had recently lost his job after going off on a bizarre rant about Donald Trump during a work meeting. After he was fired, former co-workers were reportedly worried that he might return to the company and carry out a revenge shooting. He was an awkward loner who was known for acting overly hostile and disrespectful toward his neighbors. One person who lived nearby told the South Florida Sun-Sentinel that he never met Huber, but that he had called the cops on him and complained to their homeowners association about him in the past. A former neighbor remembered one instance when Huber, who she described as odd, allegedly confronted an exterminator with a gun, and police had been called to his home multiple times over noise and nuisance complaints. At the time of the shooting, the FBI was investigating Huber for crimes against minors, which was a serious departure from his otherwise squeaky clean history. The act of violence marked the first double shooting of FBI agents in the line of duty in over 30 years, and rocked the law enforcement community to its core. Residents at Huber's apartment building were also left shaken by the incident, which served as a chilling reminder that you never know what your neighbors are capable of. Number 1. Journalist meets injustice. Percival Mabasa, or Percy Lapid, was a popular radio commentator from the Philippines, which is considered one of the most dangerous countries for journalists to live in. Corruption is rife, guns are easy to get, and the government seems to not like free speech just as much as criminals. In addition to being members of a historically vulnerable profession, journalists in the Philippines are no match for the sheer power of their enemies. Despite these dangers, Lapid fought endlessly for journalists' rights at a time when professionals in the field were being targeted with violence and government restrictions tightened their speech. He also openly criticized high-ranking politicians, including the country's president. The 63-year-old was driving in the city of Las Piñas one night in 2022 when 2 men on a motorcycle suddenly caught up with his car and opened fire on him, shooting him through the vehicle's window. Lapid died not long after from his injuries. Authorities were hesitant to declare a motive in the crime, but many people naturally assumed Lapid was probably killed for his outspoken efforts in defense of his profession. The case garnered worldwide attention among journalists, free speech advocates, and human rights groups who strongly urged Philippine leaders to investigate the case and bring the shooter to justice. A few weeks after Lapid's death, a man named Joel Estorial confessed to the crime and surrendered to law enforcement. He turned over a gun that he said was used in the shooting, and ballistics tests confirmed he was telling the truth. Estorial was charged with murder and put in jail to await the next steps in his case as it works its way through the country's slow justice system. Thanks for watching. Would you rather live in a place where crime is rare but extremely gruesome when it does happen, or in a community where petty crimes are a regular occurrence but brutality is practically unheard of? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe. See you soon. Bye.